Wake up! Wake up!
It's showtime. I just pulled my elbow. Ow, my legs. Okay, so I think I made a mistake. I think we need to do something a little more my speed. Let's see here. No, I want to save those for a later date. People didn't like me for liking this one. I might cover that again someday. That one's pretty good. People like this video that I made. Those ones, I'm going to save those for a different day. I already covered those ones. Might cover them again. I don't want to talk about Sonic. That's a death sentence. Deadpool, the game's mid. Need for Speed, I regret making that video. Forza, that stuff's mid. Ooh, here we go. The first Michael Bay Transformers film is one of my favorite films of all time. I am certainly nostalgic over that one alongside the one from 1986. Not because they were any good, in fact, the age is showing in both of them, but come on, this movie's still a great time. Just skip about the first 20 minutes and you'll be fine. And of course, this film released in 2007, a time where licensed games were the norm. So of course, we were blessed with Transformers, the game. Not to be confused with Transformers, that one Armada game that Atari made 3 years prior. Part of me thought I played this game before when I was a child, because I had an epiphany and realized that one of the first games I ever played was Transformers Revenge of the Fallen on Xbox 360. So I thought I may have played this one as well. And after playing it, I can guarantee you that I had no prior knowledge of any of this and any of what happened in this game. This is an alien to me. I bought a physical copy when I found one, but then remembered it wasn't backwards compatible, so I wasted $10. But going into this game, I had the lowest expectations as possible. That way the game could, I don't know, impress me, or I could at least get enjoyment out of it. And somehow, some way, I was still let down. The game is really bad. Somehow it still clears another game that I'll cover way later on down the line that is a part of this franchise. But man, the game is not very long, taking at most maybe like 6 hours, but if you removed any recycled content and cut down missions that went on way longer than they should, it would take about 30 minutes to an hour, and I wish I was joking. The craziest part about all of this to me though, is that the game is developed by Traveler's Tales, the guys behind the LEGO Star Wars games, the ones that are actually well made. But let's talk about what the game has to offer, because not much of it is good. I'm gonna be all over the place, so let's kick this off with talking about the graphics. Listen, these days I'm not one to care about how dated a game looks. I know that Need for Speed ranking really gave everyone the absolute worst impression of me as a person, but this game looks rancid. I kind of exaggerate, but honestly, the game just kind of looks whatever. It's not the ugliest game I've ever played, but I'm not going to sit here and say it's one of the prettier games, especially from this generation. For instance, I emulated the PS3 version, and I mean, it looks fine. It kind of just looks like a slightly better looking PS2 game, but at some points it does get a bit ugly, and honestly some of the levels also look pretty boring as well. But enough about graphics, because a game is more than just what we see, it's what we play. So the campaigns are split into two, one for the Autobots and one for the Decepticons. I'm not sure if this was the first game to do so or not, but each campaign lasts for roughly around 3 to 4 hours, and I'll be completely honest, I'm fine with that. In terms of the story, I see where Deadpool got its inspiration from. It's completely all over the place. It takes stuff from the movie and just throws them everywhere. Like, none of the missions feel connected, none of the cutscenes feel connected, it just feels all over the place. It just makes no damn sense in the slightest, but to its credit, I will say it leads to some of the funniest moments I've seen in a video game in a long time. But also, Shia Lebouf is in this game and it's horrifying.
That's my car?
Oh, where can I get one like that?
He's buying us time. Come on, run!
The thing that finally broke me with this game was seeing Shockwave though, because he's not in that first movie. They just took his Gen 1 design and threw him in the game and called it a day. Keep in mind, we don't see this dude till 2011. I don't know why he's here, but it's hilarious. The combat in this game, it's not great. It feels very clunky when in action. You can melee, you can shoot, you can even grab things and throw them at enemies. With that said, which do you think is the most effective at taking down enemies? I'll give you a second. Throwing stuff. When you are fighting another Transformer, the most effective ability you have is being able to throw stuff, which can be from a car to a bus to a tree. The melee combat is generally pretty effective on smaller and even some of the bigger enemies, but throwing stuff knocks them over, it sends them flying, it looks really funny in the process, which honestly, the physics in this game are top tier. Honestly, this is one of the best things this game has. In fact, certain boss fights quite literally require throwing stuff, or else you just can't damage the guy at all. There is one boss fight, or enemy, I guess this guy's a regular enemy, where Optimus says something like, there's gotta be another way to damage him. And that other way of damaging him requires throwing him, and you can only do that if you knock him over and then pick him up and throw him. Which, don't get me wrong, I really like this mechanic in theory. I just don't think it's executed very well. As funny as that sounds, it's the most painful thing to do, and same with Shockwave's boss fight. I honestly didn't enjoy the Shockwave boss fight, not only because it went on way longer than it should have. The way you actually damage him, it feels stupid. They're just not fun to fight against. In fact, some of the regular enemies aren't either. Most of it comes down to the clunkiness of its mechanics, or tedium, or whatever this was. It's a shame how bad it feels trying to pull these off, because not only of how powerful they actually are, being the most effective ability you have in combat, and with how useless ranged weapons are, but in order to pick up objects, you gotta be in a specific direction facing that object just to pick it up. And whatever direction you look at, well, that's where the bus is going.
This would be fine enough if the controls were quick and snappy, but no, the look sensitivity, even turned to high, is just too slow, so you end up in situations where you throw an object, but because you didn't wait to fully turn towards the enemy, you just threw that bus into an apartment complex, killing 18 people. Back to you, Inferno.
Not to mention the climbing. Oh, the climbing. It's not a bad mechanic, but it's just really clunky. You walk up to a wall and start climbing, which sounds all fine and good, unless you're in combat, because now if you're too close to a building and turn the wrong way, you might just get stuck trying to climb a wall when you're trying to fight somebody. Then there's the vehicle handling, and now I understand. This game wasn't trying to be Need for Speed Prostate Exam. However, it has no reason being this stiff. It makes sense for someone like Optimus or Ironhide, who are big trucks. And maybe even Bumblebee in the opening level where you are the 1970s Camaro. But do you have a reason for why the Pontiac Solstice handles this way? It also doesn't help that, especially when driving, the camera is shoved so far up your ass, you have such a terrible field of view, only making it harder trying to drive in this game. The aircraft handling isn't all that bad. I actually found it tolerable, which was what I was hoping the regular vehicles were. Fine. But the actual handling of the aircrafts does feel good. It feels a bit sluggish and slow and stiff, but it feels good because of that. Unlike when you're driving a car and you feel so stiff you can't even properly take a turn. The actual level design itself and the missions you do and the mission structure is honestly not that bad. At least the missions themselves, I don't have a huge problem with them. The only issue is that they just keep going, and then they keep going, and then they keep going, and then they keep going. You get the point. For a game that can take up to 6 hours to beat, they really try to extend the runtime by just making a quick 2-minute mission last 5 times as long just to keep you playing. The first few Blackout missions in the Decepticon campaign, for example, the one where you gotta search for data and destroy outposts to get that data, why do they have so much health? This Decepticon should be able to eviscerate these buildings in mere seconds. Why is it like this? There will be points in this level where you just don't have anyone to fight because you killed everything, so you're just standing in place shooting at a building for a near minute. Or in the Hoover Dam as Bumblebee, when you open up those doors and those drones come out, you do that, what, 2-3 times? And the third time, you have 2 drones that pop out, so you technically have to destroy 4 drones before they get to a spot and alert the alarm and make you restart from the first part of that. It's unnecessary. Also doesn't help that you have to stay in a specific zone or else you'll get a ticking clock of death to get back in the zone. And this works for certain moments, like when you're chasing that helicopter that's taking Bumblebee. That one makes sense, because if you're out of the zone, then what's even the point, right? But then when you're fighting Barricade in the beginning of the Autobot campaign, why? At that point, just spawn me there. You're already interrupting gameplay every 2 minutes to insert a cutscene. You might as well just throw me over there. Surprisingly, there's an okay amount of enemy variety. There is 6 total of them, but they aren't traditional Decepticons and Autobots. They are literally just drones that look like V1's father. One of them was supposed to be sponsored by Pepsi according to the wiki. These guys come in different shapes and act differently, like a forklift. Why did they choose that as an alt form? That is so useless. I just landed on Earth and I'm waiting till I see one of those dumbass Autobots, but while being here I chose to be a truck for my alt form. Hey, you over there, what's your alt form? A flower pot. A what? I chose to be a flower pot. A what? That's not even a vehicle. Did you make a mistake? I like being a flower. You can always choose another one whenever. The last 2 things I have to say about the core gameplay is honestly not being able to change the characters whenever you want. You're basically stuck playing whoever is assigned in that level, and part of me thinks this is simply just due to possible rushed development, not a big enough budget, because it just kind of feels like an obvious thing this game would have. Especially for a game that tries to have these hub worlds, which in theory are kind of cool. The game tries to be a bit of an open world game, but there's really not much to do, not much to see, and you just don't have much reason to go back to the hub worlds because you can't even play the character you want. And then there's the destructible environments. Now, it's no Battlefield or a game that actually has destruction as a focus, but I found this to be pretty impressive, especially for a licensed game. Not only was it entertaining to watch someone's house explode because you have terrible aim, whoops, but it's just fun. I don't know what the right word is for it. I was gonna say it makes the environment feel lived in, but that's not right because this world feels pretty dead if you ask me. But it's cool. That's the only way I can explain it in a way that makes sense. Despite everything, every single issue the game has, how tedious and repetitive the combat gets, how poor the handling in vehicle mode is, how tedious the missions get, and how drawn out the entire game is for how short of a runtime it has. This game is really, and I mean really funny. I know I say something is funny a lot, but I have never laughed so hard at a game in a long time. The cutscenes in this game are so terrible. They are animated like an SFM I'd watch on YouTube back in 2012. You can just tell that the guys that made the LEGO games made this just off of this alone, because the physical comedy is very much present, and it's easily the best part about this game. Then there's the voice acting in this game. It's fine, the only real standouts being Peter Cullen as Optimus and Frank Welker as Megatron, which they're not bad, they're pretty good. And Shia Lebouf as Shia LaBeouf. There's a lot of very stiff performances in this game, don't get me wrong, but something about these two just sounds so lifeless. And we've already been made aware of Megan Fox's voice acting abilities, but it feels like it's not even Shia LaBeouf there. It sounds more like Hasbro and Paramount operating a husk that sounds eerily similar to Shia LaBeouf. So Shia LaBeouf! The rest of them are ultimately fine. Ironhide sounds kinda similar. Jazz, that's not Jazz. That doesn't even sound remotely close to the movie. There is some extra stuff in this game, like commercials for the movie, intros to each show within the Unicron trilogy, 158 images varying from many different things like concept art, and probably the one thing most people care about, and that's the skins. You got G1 Megs and Prime, and then some recolors of Starscream and Jazz, RoboVision Optimus Prime, but as I said, you can't change the characters whenever you want, so this just feels very pointless. If you beat all the missions in both campaigns, you get access to Cybertron, but you can't transform and all you can do is destroy 35 enemies. How fun! There is also side missions that range from destroying stuff, finding stuff, and racing, where as the wiki describes it, every checkpoint does load the timer, but you lose time for transforming, which happens often because the buildings are coated with a substance that makes you transform the moment you touch it, and you have to race in order to reach the checkpoints in time. Are you mad?
You will be.
I didn't play these. You need to get these Energon cubes, 20 of them at least, just to pay your way into it, and I was already not enjoying the game after a while, so I just didn't force myself to do it, but the way races are described sounds funny. And that's Transformers the game. Video game adaptation of the 2007 Michael Bay Transformers film, one of my favorite films of all time. I don't know, I guess I was just kind of expecting something at least more fun. It has very few qualities in my opinion, but don't get me wrong, there is still something here. But this feels more like one of those games that I had to have played when I was a kid, or back when it released. But it looks like even people at the time of release didn't even like it either. But that's all I have to say. At the end of the day, this is just my opinion, so if you had a different experience with this game, let me know. Make sure to follow me on social medias, that one, and then that one. Also, make sure to like the video if you want to see me continue making videos on these, because I think as I plan to move on, I'm going to play Revenge of the Fallen, which by the time this video is in the editing process, I've probably already beaten the game. Subscribe too, because I'd love to have you here. And most importantly, if you enjoyed the video, good. Now goodbye.